History Uncovered, we investigate the 1917 Battle of Passchendaele, how it is remembered by New Zealanders today, and why this is the case. Our special reporter went undercover to find out what modern-day New Zealanders truly know about Passchendaele. What do you know about the Battle of Passchendaele?
Well, the main thing I know is it was a battle in the First World War where a lot of people died, and it was somewhere around France or Belgium, but that's basically it, really.
What do you know about the Battle of Passchendaele?
Battle of Passchendaele? It's a battle somewhere in France, I think.
What do you know about the Battle of Passchendaele?
I think it occurred in either World War I or World War II.
So it's clear that many New Zealanders are unsure about the specifics of the Battle of Passchendaele, and some don't remember it at all. Our journalists are going to fill in the gaps in our Passchendaele knowledge and help us to come to grips with what really happened. World War I was triggered by the assassination of Austro-Hungarian Archduke Franz Ferdinand on the 28th of June 1914, bringing to a head long-term tensions over increasing militarism, alliances, and the competition between European powers for colonial dominance. World War I began on 28 July 1914, and New Zealand Prime Minister William Massey pledged New Zealand's support for the Empire and Mother England immediately. New Zealand entering the war on the 5th of August 1914. By 1917, the war had been going on 3 years, and the initial enthusiasm and excitement for war had well and truly faded. What started out as an adventure, which people expected to be over by Christmas, had turned into a nightmare, people realizing war was horrific and tragic. The British Army commanders were eager to finally end the war, and under pressure to do so. They believed a big push would defeat Germany, which had drained reserves of manpower after the 1916 Battle of the Somme and the spring offensives. The success of the Battle of Messines gave Sir Douglas Haig, British Commander-in-Chief, confidence and made him optimistic about the Allied ability to succeed in Ypres. Haig believed the war could only be won on the Western Front, the military frontier in Belgium and France. Military historian Llewellyn Woodward said of Haig, "He made up his mind in 1915 that the war could be won on the Western Front and only on the Western Front." The major failure of Gallipoli on the Eastern Front contributed to this opinion. Therefore, the Third Battle of Ypres, also known as the Battle of Passchendaele, was launched with the fundamental objective of the attacks to be the defeat of the German army, said Sir Douglas Haig. Ypres was a town in Belgium located along the Western Front. It was held by the Allies and an important military centre for them, with millions of Allied soldiers passing through Ypres on their way to the front line. It was strategically significant because it was close to the Belgian coastline. The Allies hoped that by successfully launching an offensive, they would capture and be able to control the Belgian coastline. The coastline in ports such as Ostend and Zeebrugge was held by Germany, from which they could directly release submarines and U-boats into the English Channel, sinking Allied shipping. The War Committee of the British Cabinet indicated that there was no operation of war they regarded of greater importance than the expulsion of Germans from the Belgian coast due to the significant impact this was having on the Allied war effort. The Allied Ypres salient jutted out into German territory, making it very vulnerable as the Germans could attack from the north, east, and south. It was also low-lying ground surrounded by high, German-controlled ridges. Passchendaele Ridge was the highest ridge in the area and the last high ground before you hit open country. This made it the best place in the area for the Germans to see what was going on in the Ypres salient. The Allies therefore wanted to capture Passchendaele Ridge to straighten their line and capture further ridges in order to achieve tactically superior positions by reducing their vulnerability due to the shape of the salient. Furthermore, if Passchendaele Ridge was captured, the Germans would be outflanked and the Allies able to attack the key area of the Ruhr, Germany's main region of weapons production during the war. The Passchendaele Offensive, also called the Third Battle of Ypres, began on July 31, 1917. However, the heavy rain from the end of September and artillery bombing meant that the battlefield effectively became a swamp, and the Allies' uphill advance made them vulnerable when they launched offensive against the Germans. After the moderately successful battles of Menin Road Ridge and Polygon Wood and Brutenside, the 3rd Australian Division and the New Zealand Division were ordered to lead the attack on Bellevue Spur on October the 12th. The attack was a complete disaster in every way, shape and form. There was confusion before the attack even started. The artillery failed to break the German wire, so the New Zealand Division ran into the unbroken wire and suffered heavy losses. Furthermore, the appalling, muddy conditions made it difficult for any advances to be made. By the end of the day, all the attacking units had been forced to retreat to their original position, survivors returning to horrific living conditions. The Canadian Corps relieved 2nd Anzac Corps on the 18th of October, and the New Zealand Division pulled out in the days following. The offensive was closed down in November, having cost the Allied 100,000 casualties from September the 20th, including the lives of 45 New Zealand officers, 800 New Zealand men, and more than 2,700 New Zealand casualties on October 12, 1917 alone. Strategically, the entire Passchendaele offensive was a complete failure, failing to gain any territory or impede the German coastal or industrial access. So why does what is often referred to as the blackest day in New Zealand history, October the 12th, 1917 being the greatest loss of New Zealand life on a single day, remain largely anonymous for New Zealanders today? History Uncovered takes a deeper look. We remember historical events for several reasons: our involvement and the impact of the event on us, the media coverage and public awareness of the event, the extent to which the event appeals to our national mindset or it was a success, the timing of the event, and our comfort with the event. We tend to remember and place greater importance on events to which we feel a connection to because of personal involvement and impact upon us. For example, most of us in New Zealand are aware of the Treaty of Waitangi, but few New Zealanders could tell you much about Bulgaria in the Middle Ages. In all, more than 120,000 New Zealanders enlisted in World War I, and around 103,000 served overseas. 18,500 New Zealanders were killed during or because of the war, and over 41,000 were wounded. A significant portion of these was due to the 8-phase Battle of Passchendaele, especially the Battle of First Passchendaele on October the 12th, where 845 were killed and 2,700 wounded, the greatest in New Zealand's history. This impacted these men, their friends, families, and their communities. New Zealand was a country of a mere 1 million people at the time, so the high rate of casualties per capita meant people all across New Zealand society were directly affected by the war, and many New Zealanders retain a sense of connection to their ancestors or community members who fought in the war through Anzac Day and cenotaphs. Historians Keith Sinclair and David McIntyre argue that this shared experience of World War I unified us as a country and was a milestone in the formation of our national identity, McIntyre observing it led to a much greater sense of New Zealand identity. The significant involvement and impact of the Battle of Passchendaele on New Zealanders would lead one to believe that New Zealanders would be well versed in the battle and regularly commemorate it. However, this is unfortunately often not the case, so let's look at other factors as to why this may be. Media coverage and public awareness. The extent to which an event is reported in the media and the attention it receives is a key determining factor in how well an event is remembered. Greater news coverage, both at the time and over an extended period, affects how widespread knowledge about the event is and the extent of that knowledge and remembrance. Our journalists here at History Uncovered have analysed the frequency of key words in New Zealand newspapers in the Digital New Zealand database using QueryPic. The frequency Gallipoli is mentioned is the red line, whereas the frequency Passchendaele is mentioned is the blue line. This clearly shows how Gallipoli has received significantly more media coverage over the years. In the year of Gallipoli in 1915, there were 8,869 articles in New Zealand newspapers on Gallipoli, whereas in the year of the Passchendaele Offensive, 1917, there were only 834 articles on Passchendaele. Gallipoli was in the news more than Passchendaele even in 1917, when the Passchendaele Offensive was taking place. This trend continued over time, with Gallipoli consistently featuring in more New Zealand newspaper articles, whilst Passchendaele drops off the radar. This lack of media coverage has meant Passchendaele is not at the forefront of New Zealanders' minds, and the public has had little exposure to the battle. In considering why there was little media coverage on Passchendaele, we must consider the following factors. The Passchendaele Offensive was a dismal failure. It did not achieve any of its strategic objectives or advance the Allied position in the war. 13,000 Allied casualties were the cost for at most 200 to 500 yards. The government in New Zealand was able to censor the media, including newspapers, that was believed to be damaging to the war effort. They therefore minimised negative press attention to try and maintain high morale in army recruitment efforts in an increasingly war-weary New Zealand. This is highlighted by Ian Mackenzie. By that time, New Zealand was war-weary, and the government didn't want to encourage the news of a massive defeat. We don't remember because it was too terrible. This also meant that New Zealanders have been less drawn to the story of the Battle of Passchendaele. As historian Glenn Harper writes, the battles that strike a chord with New Zealanders in general tend to be what I call heroic failures, where we almost succeed but don't quite make it. These appeal more to our national pride and underdog spirit, and include battles such as Gallipoli, Crete and Monte Cassino, which are well known within New Zealand. The Battle of Passchendaele, Glenn Harper says, had no redeeming features at all, and was a disaster from start to finish that should have never gone ahead. Although this does not diminish in any way the contribution and sacrifices made by those involved, nor the commemoration it is worthy of, it has meant that New Zealanders do not remember the Battle of Passchendaele very often. The timing of the event also has a significant impact. We remember firsts. The majority of us can name Sir Edmund Hillary as the first man to conquer Everest, but how many of us know the 9th man to do so? The often remembered Gallipoli campaign was New Zealand's first major effort in World War I and first campaign with major casualties. The public is consequently highly aware of the campaign, both throughout history and in modern day. The first memorial for Gallipoli took place just a year later, on April the 25th, 1916, and this tradition has continued to this day, Anzac Day becoming increasingly prominent and recognised within New Zealand, and ensuring Gallipoli is well remembered. The Battle of First Passchendaele came in the middle of the war and was one of many battles on the Western Front. It came at a time when New Zealanders were war-weary, hardened to loss, and tired of the sacrifices war required. Consequently, it is not as well remembered by New Zealanders. Comfort level with the event. Many soldiers suffered shell shock and mental trauma due to their horrific experiences in the Battle of Passchendaele. In New Zealand at the time, and to a lesser extent today, there was stigma around talking about your struggles, and consequently many stories went untold. This can be seen in Gunnar Benestokes' words in Passchendaele, The Anatomy of a Tragedy, by Dr. Andrew MacDonald. Gunnar Bert Stokes says, "I think it is just as well I did not write my diary daily whilst in Ypres. I think I may have told too many tales of woe. As it is now, nearly 2 months afterwards, I am not inclined to think up of it too much, and as for writing of it, well, it is out of the question." This shows how many did not share their experiences of Passchendaele, so there was less public awareness about this important battle. In current day New Zealand, many New Zealanders are unsure about Passchendaele and know little about it. Consequently, it is not taught often in schools or discussed as comprehensively as more commonly known battles such as Crete and Gallipoli. It can be quite difficult to come to terms with what happened at Passchendaele, for to fully come to grips with it, one needs to understand its role in the context of World War I and the Western Front. The narrative and ideas surrounding the Battle of Passchendaele can be quite difficult to understand. For the Battle of First Passchendaele on October the 12th was just one battle within the Passchendaele Offensive. within those of the Western Front within World War I. So many battles and names, in addition to a lack of familiarity, means many place learning about Passchendaele in the too hard basket. In recent years, there has been a notable movement to increase public awareness and commemoration of Passchendaele to better honour the sacrifices made by New Zealanders at the time. In 2009, 5,000 commemorative white crosses were erected at Fort Takapuna as part of the exhibition Passchendaele, the Belgians Have Not Forgotten. Prime Minister Helen Clark, who in 2007 was the first Prime Minister to attend one of the 10 yearly commemorations of the Battle of Passchendaele, attending the 90th commemoration of the battle in 2007, after which she called for 5 yearly rather than 10 yearly commemorations, and greater emphasis on the Battle of Passchendaele, which she believes should never be forgotten. We need to remember Passchendaele and increase awareness of this important moment in our history. This journalist was guilty of regularly having passed the commemorative crosses at Fort Takapuna, but never realised without realising their link to the Battle of Passchendaele. Honouring the sacrifices made by New Zealanders in this battle will ensure we fulfil the last line of the Ode of Remembrance. We will remember them.
And that finishes off the History Uncovered special on the Battle of Passchendaele. Thank you for watching.